What if your spouse is not the reason you're unhappy?
Every story's got a spark, and every spark's got a name. This is the journey of finding mine. Who am I when the lights go low? Who am I when the world says no? Searching through my past, trying to free my soul, one truth at a time, letting every story unfold.
Welcome back to the Who Am I podcast, where we ask the questions that make us look in the mirror, tell the truth, and become better from the inside out. Once again, I'm your host, Jethro Jeff Hopgood, and today we're talking about something that may feel uncomfortable at first, but I promise you, if you stay with me, I believe it can bring freedom, healing, and clarity to your life and your relationship. So today's episode is called Your Spouse Can't Make You Happy, and that's not their job. Now, before somebody pauses this and says, oh, so my spouse doesn't have to care about how I feel, that's not exactly what I'm saying. Before somebody says, so you're telling me marriage doesn't matter? That's not what I'm saying either. Marriage matters, love matters, connections matter, effort matters, affections matter, communication matters, being seen, heard, valued, and respected, it all matters. But here's the truth we have to wrestle with. Your spouse can contribute to your happiness, but they cannot become the source of it. They can add joy to your life, but they cannot manufacture joy inside a heart that has not learned how to heal. They can love you deeply, but they cannot complete what only God, growth, self-awareness, and inner work can restore. Because when you make your spouse responsible for your happiness, you put a weight on them that no human was designed to ever carry. And sometimes the tension in the relationship is not because love is absent. Sometimes the tension is because one person is asking another person to be their peace, their purpose, their therapist, their confidence, their emotional regulator, their validation, their identity, and their source. And that is too much weight for one person to hold. So let me ask you something. What if your spouse is not the reason you are unhappy? What if they are simply standing close enough to the pain for you to blame them? What if the emptiness you feel did not start in the marriage? What if the frustration you keep pointing at them was already living inside of you before they ever said, I do? What if you are asking your spouse to fix a wound they did not create? That is hard to hear because it is easier to say, I would be happy if they change. It is easier to say, I would have peace if they did more. It is easier to say, I would feel better if they loved me the way I need to be loved. And yes, sometimes your spouse does need to grow. Sometimes your spouse does need to listen better. Sometimes your spouse does need to show up, communicate, apologize, be more present, be more affectionate, be more intentional. But here's where the mirror comes in. What if they change and you still feel empty? What happens if they apologize and you still feel insecure? What happens if they give you attention and you still need more? What happens if they reassure you and 5 minutes later your anxiety asks for another receipt? What happens when their love touches you but it cannot reach the part of you that keeps hiding from yourself? That is when we realize this is not just a marriage issue. This is an identity issue. This is a healing issue, a happiness issue. This is a who am I when nobody is performing for me issue. Because your spouse can hold your hand, but they cannot do your healing. Your spouse can speak life over you, but they cannot believe it for you. Your spouse can support you, but they cannot become your foundation. Your spouse can walk beside you, but they cannot live inside your soul and make you whole. But before we go any further, before we get any deeper, let's do a quick pre-check. How are you really doing? Not the version that you give people when they ask you in passing, and you know I'm not looking for the I'm good answer, not the we're fine answer, not the it's just marriage answer, but how are you really doing? Are you tired? Are you disappointed? Are you quietly resentful because you feel like your spouse does not understand the weight you carry? Are you frustrated because you thought marriage would feel different by now? Are you emotionally drained from expecting your spouse to notice what you never actually communicated? Are you angry because you keep waiting for them to make you feel better, but deep down, you do not even know what better looks like? Maybe you love your spouse, but you are still unhappy. Maybe your spouse loves you, but you still feel lonely. Maybe your home looks good from the outside, but inside you're asking, why don't I feel fulfilled? Maybe you have been thinking if they would just change, I would be okay. But today, I want you to gently challenge that, not to shame you, not to blame you, not to excuse unhealthy behaviors, but to free you. Because the moment you make one person responsible for your happiness, you give them power over your peace. And the moment they fail, forget, disappoint, miss the cue, say the wrong thing, or do not respond the way you hoped, your whole emotional world falls apart. That is not love. That is emotional dependency dressed up as expectation. And many people do not realize they are not just looking for partnership. They are looking for rescue. Rescue me. So today, we are going to talk about what it means to find happiness within. We're going to talk about why your spouse cannot be your source of happiness. We are going to talk about how unhealed pain can turn a good relationship into a pressure cooker. We are going to talk about emotional responsibility, self-awareness, joy, peace, identity, and what it means to love someone without making them carry what only you were meant to confront. And I want you to hear this clearly. This episode is not about blaming the unhappy spouse. This episode is not about giving toxic partners a free pass. This episode is definitely not about telling you to tolerate neglect, disrespect, abuse, betrayal, or emotional abandonment. Absolutely not. Healthy love requires accountability. But this episode is about checking the place inside of us that says, you are responsible for making me feel whole, because that part right there can destroy any relationship. Not all at once, little by little, expectation by expectation, argument by argument, silent treatment by silent treatment, unspoken need by unspoken need, until one day you are not just married to your spouse, you are married to resentment. So let's talk about this. Your spouse can add to your happiness, but they cannot be your happiness. Let's start here. Your spouse can bring joy into your life. They can make you laugh. They can encourage you. They can pray with you. They can comfort you. They can support your dreams. They can make the house feel warmer when they walk in the room. And that is beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. That is part of partnership. But they cannot be the entire source of your happiness. Because if your spouse becomes your happiness, then your emotional stability rises and falls based on their behavior. If they text back fast, you're good. If they are quiet, you spiral. If they are affectionate, you feel secure. If they are distracted, you feel rejected. If they compliment you, you feel valuable. If they forget, you feel invincible. That is a dangerous, absolutely very dangerous way to live. Because now love is no longer love. Love becomes a scoreboard. You start measuring every tone, every look, every pause, every delay, every facial expression, every missed opportunity, every unspoken expectation. And before you know it, you are not enjoying your spouse. You are auditing them. You are watching for proof that they love you, proof that they care, proof that they still want you, proof that you matter, proof that you are enough. But here's the deeper question. Why does your soul need constant proof? That does not mean your spouse should stop being loving. It means you may need to ask, what is happening inside of me that I cannot receive love without fearing I am about to lose it? Wow. Sometimes your spouse is giving love, but your wound does not know how to trust it. Sometimes your spouse is present, but your insecurity keeps interpreting silence as rejection. Sometimes your spouse is trying, but your pain keeps saying it's not enough. And that is where healing has to happen. Because your spouse can give you reassurance, but they cannot cure insecurity. They can be affectionate, but they cannot heal abandonment wounds. They can be faithful, but they cannot fix every fear that betrayal has taught you. They can be kind, but they cannot undo every harsh word you heard growing up. They can even tell you that you are enough, but they cannot force you to believe it. At some point, you have to stop asking your spouse to become the medicine for a wound that needs deeper healing. You can't. So this leads us to this next point. Marriage magnifies what is already in you. Marriage magnifies what is already in you. Let me say this. Marriage does not just create problems. A lot of times, marriage reveals them. Marriage has a way of putting a mirror in front of you. It reveals your patience. It reveals your communication style. It reveals your emotional maturity. It reveals your expectations. It reveals how you handle disappointment. It reveals how you respond when you do not get your way. It reveals whether you can apologize. It reveals whether you can listen without defending yourself. It reveals whether you can be corrected without feeling attacked. Marriage is one of the strongest mirrors you will ever stand in front of. And sometimes we do not like what we see. So instead of saying, I need to grow, we say, they need to change. Mm. Instead of saying, I have a wound here, we say, you keep hurting me. Uh-oh. Instead of saying, I need to communicate my needs, we say, you should already know. Instead of saying, I am scared, we say, you don't care. Instead of saying, I feel insecure, we say, you never do enough. And listen, your feelings may be real, but feelings are not always accurate translators. You can feel rejected and not actually be rejected. You can feel abandoned and not actually be abandoned. You can feel unloved while standing next to somebody who is trying to love you the best way they know how. This is why self-awareness matters, because without self-awareness, you make your spouse responsible for your emotions they did not create. You punish them for pain they did not cause. You accuse them based on fear instead of facts. And you turn your past into a third person in the marriage. Now it is you, your spouse, and your unresolved pain sitting at the table. Uh-oh. And the pain is loud. The pain says this: don't trust them. The pain says they will leave like everybody else. The pain says you better control this before you get hurt. The pain says if they really loved you, they would know. The pain says make them prove it again. But the amazing thing about healing says pause. Healing says, is this really happening, or am I being triggered? Healing says, am I responding to my spouse, or am I responding to an old wound? Healing says, can I communicate instead of accuse? Healing says, can I be honest without being harmful? That is the work, my friend. Which leads us to this. Unhealed people often confuse love with rescue. This is a very big one, because sometimes people do not want love. They want rescue. The rescue me syndrome. They want someone to come into their life and make all the sadness go away. They want someone to erase the loneliness, fix the confidence, heal the childhood, silence the anxiety, provide the purpose, and make every day feel meaningful. That sounds romantic in movies. It really does. But in real life, it becomes exhausting, because your spouse is not your savior. Your spouse is not your therapist. Your spouse is not your emotional punching bag. Your spouse is not your parent. Your spouse is not your identity. Your spouse is not your God. Your spouse is not your God. Your spouse is your partner. That's why it's called a partnership. We are partnering together. We are in this together. And when you confuse love with rescue, you start expecting your spouse to carry things they were never, ever assigned to carry. You start saying things like, you're supposed to make me happy. You're supposed to know what I need. You're supposed to fix this feeling. You're supposed to make me feel complete. But true love does not say, complete me because I refuse to face myself. True love says this: walk with me while I continue becoming whole. See, that is a different kind of love. That is mature love. That is healthy love. That is love with accountability, because when you are looking for rescue, Every disappointment feels like betrayal. If your spouse is tired, you feel neglected. If your spouse needs space, you feel abandoned. If your spouse has a hard day, you feel ignored. And if your spouse cannot meet your emotional needs in that exact moment, you know what you feel? You feel unloved. And somebody listening knows exactly what I'm talking about. But let me ask you this. What if they are not failing you? What if they are human? What if they love you, but they also get tired? What if they care, but they do not always know what to say? What if they want to support you, but they cannot carry your entire emotional world on their back? That is too much, entirely too much to ask any one person to do. See, there is a difference between needing support and demanding to be rescued. Support says, I need you with me. Rescue says, I need you to save me from me. Support says, can we talk? Rescue says, fix how I feel right now. Support says, I am struggling and I need connection. Rescue says, my happiness depends on your performance. See, that is not fair to them. That is not fair to them, and it is not healthy for you. Which leads us to this. True happiness requires inner work. See, let's talk about finding happiness within. Because that phrase can sound simple, but it is not always easy. Finding happiness within does not mean you never need anybody. Absolutely not. It does not mean that. It does not mean you become cold, detached, independent to the point that nobody can love you. It does not mean you say, I don't need my spouse, because we all need each other. Absolutely not. It's not saying that. But finding happiness within means this. It means this. I am learning how to be at peace with myself. I am learning how to be at peace with myself and how to enjoy my own life. It says I am learning how to regulate my emotions and how to name what I feel instead of blaming someone else for it. It says I am learning how to stop making my spouse responsible for parts of me that I have been avoiding. See, that is inner work. Inner work is asking, why does their silence trigger me so deeply? Why do I need constant reassurance? Why do I shut down when I feel disappointed? Why do I attack when I feel afraid? Why do I expect them to read my mind? Why do I struggle to receive love? Why do I feel empty when everything around me looks good? Why do I keep waiting for someone else to give me permission to be happy? See, those questions are not easy, but they are, however, necessary. Because you cannot heal what you refuse to name. How many times have we talked about that? You cannot heal what you refuse to name. If it's disappointment, then it's disappointment. If it looked like a duck, walk like a duck, talk like a duck, quack like a duck, then my friend, it's a duck. You cannot heal what you refuse to name. And you cannot change what you keep blaming on everybody else. Sometimes happiness is not missing because your spouse failed. Sometimes happiness is missing because you abandoned yourself. Uh-oh. You stop doing things that gave you life. You stop pursuing purpose. You stop taking care of your mind. You stop nurturing your faith. You stop laughing You stop dreaming. You stop resting. You stop being honest about what hurts. You stop having a life outside of responsibility. You became a worker, a provider, a parent, a spouse, a problem solver, a fixer, a protector. And somewhere in the middle of all of that distractions, you forgot how to be a person. Then you look at your spouse and said, make me happy. But maybe your spouse cannot give you back to yourself. Maybe that is your work, your assignment. Maybe your joy has to be rebuilt one honest decision at a time. So stop expecting your spouse to read what you refuse to say. Let's deal with communication for a minute. See, a lot of unhappiness in relationships comes from unspoken expectations. You are upset because they did not do something you never clearly asked for. Uh-oh. You are hurt because they did not notice something you never explained. You are disappointed because they did not meet a need you never named. And I know what we say they should know. But should they? Should they really know? Should they know because you communicated it clearly? Or should they know because you created a script in your head and got mad when they missed their line? That is where we have to be honest. Your spouse is not a mind reader. They may love you deeply and still not know what is happening inside of you. They may care about you and still miss the cue. They may want to meet your needs and still need you to tell them what those needs are. See, mature love requires honest communication. Can you say communication? Communication. Not hints, not sarcasm, not silence, not punishment, not testing, not never mind, not I'm fine when you are not fine. You cannot keep saying I'm fine, then resent them for believing you. You cannot keep saying nothing is wrong, then punish them for not knowing something is wrong. You cannot keep withdrawing and calling it peace. You cannot keep attacking and calling it honesty. There is a healthier way. Try saying it this way. I am not okay, but I am trying to explain it without blaming you. I feel disconnected and I want us to talk. I need affection. Not because you are failing, but because connection matters to me. I have been feeling overwhelmed and I realize I have been expecting you to fix it. I need support, but I also know I have inner work to do. See, that kind of communication changes the entire atmosphere of your relationship because now you are not attacking, you are inviting. You are not accusing, you are revealing the big reveal. You are not making them your enemy, you are letting them see your heart. So your spouse can love you, but they cannot be God. So I want to speak to the faith side of this. Let me speak to the faith side of this. Your spouse may be a gift from God, but they are not God. They can love you, but they cannot be your ultimate source. They can support you, but they cannot be your foundation. They can cover you, but they cannot be your savior. They can encourage you, but they cannot become the voice of God in your life. When you make your spouse your source, you will eventually become disappointed. Not because they are bad, because they are limited, because they are human, because they have emotions, weaknesses, blind spots. They have tired days. They have their own wounds that they are dealing with, that they're still healing from themselves. They have their own growth process. And sometimes we ask human beings to give us what only God can provide. We ask them for perfect peace when shalom comes from God. We ask them for unconditional stability. We ask them for constant pressure. We ask them for identity. We ask them for worth. But there is a place in you that no spouse, no person, no human being, no pet, no other person can fill. There is a longing in you that cannot be solved by date nights, compliments, gifts, vacations, or physical affection. See, all of those things matter. Don't get me wrong. All of those things matter, but they are not the foundation. Because if your soul is starving, your spouse can feed you attention all day and you will still feel hungry. That is why you need spiritual grounding. You need prayer. You need reflection. You need truth. You need community. You need counseling when necessary. You need self-awareness. You need to sit with yourself long enough to ask, what am I really missing? Because sometimes the answer is not my spouse needs to do more. Sometimes the answer is this: I have been disconnected from God, disconnected from myself, disconnected from my purpose, disconnected from my joy, and I blame the closest person to me. Woo! See, that is a mirror moment. So let's pause for a moment. See, this is the part of the episode where we take the mirror and turn it towards ourselves. Let's look at the mirror, not to condemn ourselves, but to examine ourselves. So ask yourself this: have I made my spouse responsible for my happiness? Ask yourself, do I expect my spouse to fix emotions I have not learned how to manage? Ask yourself, am I blaming them for emptiness that existed long before they ever came into the picture? Ask yourself, do I communicate my needs clearly, or do I expect them to read my mind? Do I want partnership, or am I demanding rescue? Ask, do I still have a life, purpose, joy, and identity outside of my spouse? And ask yourself this: have I abandoned myself and then blame my spouse for not finding me? See, that one right there is heavy. Have I abandoned myself and then blame my spouse for not finding me? Because sometimes we lose ourselves in a marriage, not because marriage took us, but because we stop choosing ourselves in a healthy way. We stop growing, we stop creating, we stop resting, praying, laughing, dreaming, checking in with our own souls. And then we look at our spouse and say, why am I not happy? Why am I not happy? But maybe the question is not just, what are they not doing? Maybe the question is this: what have I stopped doing for myself? So let me make this thing practical. Think about your life before resentment got loud. What used to bring you joy? What used to bring you joy? Was it music? Was it prayer? Was it walking outside? Was it writing, working out? Was it serving others? Was it creating something? See, these are things that used to bring you joy. Was it spending time with friends? Was it laughing without feeling guilty? Was it having quiet time without a phone in your hand? Now, let me ask you this. When did you stop? When did your whole emotional life become centered on whether another person was meeting your expectation? When did your peace become dependent on their mood? When did your joy become tied to their attention? When did your identity become wrapped up in how loved you felt that day? That is not a small thing, because when you do not have an internal anchor, when you don't have that internal anchor, every wave feels like a storm. Every disagreement feels like rejection. Every quiet moment feels like distance. It just keeps getting further and further and further and further away. And it's just a quiet moment. A quiet moment can feel like distance. Every mistake feels like proof that they do not care. But when you begin building happiness within, you do not become less loving. You know what happens? You become more stable. You stop entering every conversation desperate. You stop needing every moment to validate you. You stop making one person responsible for your entire emotional climate. You can say, I love you, and I still have work to do. You can say, I need you, but I am not making you my source. For God is the source of my strength, the source of my life. He is my firm foundation. The only one who we can absolutely lean on and depend on. You can say, I want connection, but I will not use control to get it. You can say, I am hurt, but I will communicate instead of punish. That is growth. So the psychology of it, in relationships, many of us carry attachment patterns. Some people have anxious attachments. That means when they sense distance, they panic. They may need constant reassurance. They may fear abandonment. They may interpret silence as rejection. Some people have avoidant patterns. That means this: when emotions get intense, they pull away. They may shut down, detach, or feel overwhelmed by another person's need for closeness. Some people learned early on in childhood that love was inconsistent. So now they struggle to feel safe even when love is present. Some people learned that they had to perform to be loved. So now they feel unworthy unless someone is constantly affirming them. Some people grew up emotionally neglected. So they now expect their spouse to notice every unspoken need because deep down inside, they are still grieving the times nobody noticed them before. And here's the thing, marriage will touch those places. It will touch the abandonment wound. It will touch the rejection wound. It will touch the insecurity wound. It will touch the I'm not enough wound. It will touch the people always leave wound. It will touch the I have to protect myself wound. And when those wounds get touched, we often call it a marriage problem. But sometimes it is an emotional trigger. A trigger is not an excuse to hurt someone. A trigger is information. It tells you there is something here that needs attention. So when you feel yourself spiraling, pause and ask, am I responding to what just happened? Or am I responding to what this remind me of? That question can save a conversation. That question can save a relationship. That question can stop an argument from becoming a war because sometimes your spouse said one sentence, but your pain heard 10 years of rejection. Sometimes your spouse needed a little space, but your wound heard, they are leaving me. Sometimes your spouse forgot something, but your insecurity heard, I do not matter. This is why happiness within matters, because the more you heal, the less your spouse has to pay for what happened before they arrived. So let's look at the practical steps, how to start finding happiness within. So number one, take ownership of your emotional world. Instead of saying you make me unhappy, try saying I am feeling unhappy and I need to understand why. See, that shift right there matters because you make me unhappy puts all the responsibility on them. But I am feeling unhappy opens the door to reflection. It does not excuse their behavior. It simply gives you back your power. Two, identify what you are really needing. See, sometimes you think you need your spouse to change, but what you really need is communication or rest or reassurance, maybe honesty, affection or support, time, healing. So you have to name the need because unnamed needs usually become unfair expectations. Three, stop punishing your spouse for not reading your mind. Say what you need clearly, not aggressively, not sarcastically, not after 3 days of silence, but clearly. I need us to spend intentional time together this week. I need help around the house. I need to feel heard before advice is given. I need affection. I need us to talk without phones. I need to work on myself, but I also need your support. That is healthy. 4, rebuild your own joy. Do one thing this week that gives life back to you, not for productivity, not for applause, not for content, not for anybody else, but for you. Take the walk, play the music, journal, pray, go outside, call a friend who you haven't spoken to in a while, work out, read a book, the Bible, a novel, or something. Create something. Rest, laugh, rebuild the parts of you that got buried under responsibility. 5, get help when needed. Sometimes inner work requires counseling. Sometimes couple needs counseling. Sometimes you need spiritual guidance. Sometimes you need honest community. See, there is no shame in getting help. There is wisdom in saying we need tools. Love alone is powerful, but love without tools can still struggle. You can love each other and still need help communicating. Let me say that again. You can love each other and still need help communicating. You can love each other and still need help healing. You can love each other and still need help understanding what you keep repeating. So let's reframe this whole entire topic. See, the goal is not to say my spouse cannot make me happy, so I do not need them. No, that is not the goal. Please, that's not the goal at all. And that is definitely 100% not what I'm saying. The goal is to say, my spouse cannot make me happy, so I will stop making them responsible for what only I can heal. That is the difference, my friend. Because when you find happiness within, you do not love your spouse less, you love them better. You love them more. You love them deeper. You stop needing them to carry your identity. You stop turning every disappointment into a crisis. You stop making them responsible for your self-worth. You stop using love as a demand. You start showing up more whole, and whole people can love without clinging. Whole people can communicate without attacking. Whole people need connection without becoming controlling. Whole people, that's WHOLE, whole people can admit pain without weaponizing it. Whole people can say, I am still growing. And that is the kind of marriage and relationship that gets stronger. Not perfect, but stronger. Not conflict free, but healthier. Not always easy, but honest. So allow me to speak to the person listening right now who loves their spouse, but currently feels unhappy. Before you give up, I want you to look within yourself. Before you blame everything on them, look within yourself. Before you decide the marriage is the problem, ask yourself what pain you brought into it. Before you demand that they make you happy, ask yourself when you stop participating in your own joy. Because your spouse can love you deeply and still not be able to save you from yourself. They can encourage you, but they cannot become your confidence. They can affirm you, but they cannot become your identity. They can support you, but they cannot become your purpose. They can walk with you, but they cannot heal what you refuse to face. And maybe today is the day you stop saying, make me happy, and start saying, help me grow while I learn how to find joy again. That is a much healthier request. That is a more honest request. That is a request your spouse can actually respond to. Because when you stop making your spouse your source, you give them room to be your partner. And that is what they were meant to be. Not your source, not your God, but your partner. Not your savior, your partner. Not your emotional repair shop, your partner. Not the keeper of your entire happiness, your partner. And when two people stop demanding completion from each other, Oh my goodness. And they start bringing growth to each other. Oh my goodness. Oh, how the relationship changes. The pressure lifts, the love breathes. Oh man, that just felt so good. Just sent chills through my spine. The home softens. The conversations become safer. The connections becomes real again. Wow. So just say this with me. I release my spouse from the responsibility of being my source. I take ownership of my healing. Say this with me. I can receive love without demanding rescue. I can communicate my needs without attacking. I can rebuild joy within myself. I can be loved and still do my inner work. I am not powerless over my happiness. I am growing. I am healing. I am becoming whole. So here is your final mirror test for this week. What have I been expecting my spouse to give me that I have not learned how to give myself? That is your mirror moment for this week. Ask yourself, what have I been expecting my spouse to give me that I have not learned how to give myself? Sit with that. Do not rush past it. Write it down. Pray over it. Talk about it. Bring it to counseling if you need to. But do not, please do not ignore it. Because that question may reveal the place where your healing begins. So this is your final reminder. Your final reminder. I want you to remember this. Your spouse can add to your happiness, but they cannot be the ultimate source of your happiness. Your spouse can walk with you, but they cannot become your source. They are not your God. They are not your Savior. Your spouse can love you, but they cannot do the inner work for you. So this week, stop blaming, start reflecting, and ask yourself, who am I becoming in this relationship? So before we move forward, I want you to pause for just a moment. Take a breath. Wherever you are, whatever you're carrying, this next part is for you. Let's speak life over ourselves out loud if you can, because what we say in this moment has the power to shift how we walk into the rest of our day. Let's begin with our affirmation. I am not defined by my past or limited by my mistakes. I am growing, learning, and becoming who I was created to be. I have value beyond titles, roles, and expectations. I choose honesty over fear and growth over comfort. I am allowed to change, heal, and evolve. I walk with purpose, clarity, and courage. I am becoming more aligned with my true self every day. And who I am is enough. So as we close today's episode, I want to thank you for taking this time for yourself. If something you heard inspired you, challenged you, or made you pause and reflect, please don't keep it to yourself. Share this episode with someone who may need it. Invite them into the conversation. See, ultimately, this podcast grows when we grow together. I cannot do this without you. See, we grow together through shared stories, honest reflections, and real connections. Every listen, every share, every conversation helps create a community rooted in love, rooted in purpose, rooted in hope, rooted in faith, rooted in trust and truth. So until next time, keep reflecting, keep becoming, and remember, you matter. This is the Who Am I podcast, and let's walk this journey together.
Who am I? Yeah, I'm more than the pain, more than the pride. Who am I? Who am I? Walking in purpose, no mask, no disguise. This is my voice, my rise, my life. Welcome to Who Am I?